Greetings. Welcome to our session, Climate Response and Adaptation in Outdoor Recreation with Real-World Examples. I am going to be your moderator. My name's Kenny Blumenfeld. I'm a climatologist, and we have three panelists here who know a lot about outdoor recreation. And I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to give you an overview of what's going on with our climate. It's going to be brief because I just hit anybody who is in here really hard with a bunch of climate stuff, and we're not going to dwell on that. We're just going to do a few minutes of that, and then we're going to get into an interesting discussion here. So I'm going to just start in the order that I received these, but we're going to start with Ben Popp. So put your hand up, Ben. It's Ben. He's administered the American Birkebeiner Ski Foundation, which is Wisconsin-based. It's a nonprofit foundation. And what you need to know, if you're thinking it's only about cross-country skiing, they have the iconic internationally recognized ski race. But in the last half century, they've also expanded to offer other year-round healthy, active lifestyle events, including running and biking. And aside from being with the Birkie, Ben's elected president of the World Loppet International Ski Federation, and that unites 20 long-distance ski races from Europe, the US, Asia, and Oceania. And he's got lots of really cool experiences, and maybe some of these will come out. So thank you, Ben, for being on this panel. We're excited to talk to you. Ann, could you put up your hand? Ann is the executive director of Spirit Mountain Recreation Area. Retained as an interim leader in September 2020, she's brought more than 3 decades of experience with public institutions, communities, nonprofit organizations, and industry throughout Minnesota and beyond. And she's worked with the team of recreation professionals to apply her diverse consulting skills as a strategic planner. And we really need this because, you might think of Spirit Mountain as just a ski hill, but there's actually it's a year-round recreational facility. So thank you for being on this panel. And then Lisa, please help me once more with your Lokala. She's with the Superior Hiking Trail Association. She's the executive director. And she was a resident of Duluth for 18 years and has worked locally in both the nonprofit and public sector, and currently serves on the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals Board of Directors, along with the Duluth Tourism Advisory Council. There's, again, more that we could say about each of these talented panelists, and I'm excited to talk to them and pepper them with questions and have them share some of their experiences, which is kind of the second thing we're going to do after I give you a quick overview. So, overview of climate stressors in our region, essentially. How many of you are from a Great Lakes area that's not right here in the Arrowhead of Minnesota or Twin Ports area? Okay, so maybe it's not really the Great Lakes Outdoor Summit, but anyway, we're going to talk about what's going on with the regional climate. So we've got a naturally extreme climate with a lot of variability and a lot of weather hazards. We have a changing climate because of human greenhouse gas emissions. I'd love to dive deep into the science of all of this with you, but you're just going to have to accept these facts, and if you want to argue with me about them afterwards, I'm happy to do that. Those greenhouse gas emissions have caused most of our long-term warming over the last century plus, and then when we have short-term ups and downs in our climate, those tend to be natural. We have rising global temperatures, which gives us more access to heat and water vapor, and that picture is just for fun. It's winter from last year. How many of you liked last winter? I didn't think so. Right, it was miserable for recreation. I'm a year-round bicycle commuter, so I didn't have a lot to clean out of my drivetrain, so there was some minor advantages there, but I would have liked the snow. Our climate is changing because of those last two things. So here, because of human greenhouse gas emissions, rising global temperatures, and giving us more access to heat and water vapor, we are seeing increases in temperature, humidity, and precipitation. It's especially the winter and overnight temperatures, and we have more precipitation extremes in general. And that's both heavy rainfall events like what we had this summer, and it's also heavy snow events like what we had 2 winters ago. And even the one major statewide snowfall event that we had this past winter, this non-winter, was actually a huge storm. So it's like it doesn't snow, and then when it does, it snows an awful lot. So we're getting more and sometimes bigger precipitation extremes. Some of you might know this, we really haven't yet experienced the kinds of changes in our summertime heat extremes that we've seen in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, but we have strong evidence that those are on their way. And honestly, they're probably gonna be in the form of humid extreme heat events, as opposed to, temperatures of 110 degrees. We're much more likely to have temperatures stuck maybe in the upper 90s or around 100, but with suffocating humidity. So that's a change we can look forward to. Things like tornadoes and hail and damaging winds are actually not getting more numerous or necessarily worse, but they are expanding in their seasonal range and their geographic range. And of course, as we've had more wildfires, because of things we talked about in the last session a bit, there's more stress on forests, there's more fuels to burn as a result of that. We've then had to deal with the air quality concerns that go with it. From a recreation, that's what I got. You can talk about, that's really, I'm glad I put that hook in there. It's like, shut yourself up. Okay. I'm gonna get to the panel, and we're just gonna go in basically alphabetical order here. So we'll start with Anne. So they're each gonna tell you a climate story. Basically, in the work that they do, we're gonna identify a stressor, name its impacts. We're gonna describe what they did, how they reacted to it, how they responded. This could include, there's a whole gamut of things this could include. And then we're gonna have a brief discussion. What did you learn? What maybe you would have done differently knowing what you know now? Resources that would have been helpful, and anything that you think could be helpful to others. Because I know people in this room, we're all trying to grapple with this idea. How do we continue to enjoy recreation in the face of a changing climate? So we're gonna start with Anne. Anne, you've got some slides, is that correct? All right, so I'm gonna just cue those up. Oh, those are the Berkey slides. Well then, you know what? I'm gonna go out of alphabetical order. Ben, do you wanna come up here and be, why don't you come up here, and then you can control your, slides?
All right,
Great.
Sweet. How's everybody doing? So how many people know where Cable, Wisconsin is? Good majority of people. So we're not talking to a lot of folks from Ohio, Indiana. No, all right. Anybody know what year it started? The American Birkebeiner? 1973. And during that period of time, any idea how many times it was canceled? Twice. It was canceled twice. But other times that it was altered. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of in there, but about 8 times. So really 10 times out of 50 years. So it's not a huge anomaly when something happens, but this year was quite unique for a variety of reasons. And so when we talk about stressors and things that happen, so for the American Birkebeiner, the foundation was formed in 1984. It was started by Tony Wise. It was gonna be this great thing in northern Wisconsin, a private entity, right? Well, as it evolved, it's now more than just a singular event, right? It's this economic driver. So for us, the economic impact is almost $35 million a year in northern Wisconsin. And so you think about that, right? I mean, our communities are 2,000, 3,000. We have 14,000 people in the entire county. So we realize that economic impact is really, really large when we think about it. And it's not just over 3 or 4 or 5 days, right? We talked about this a little earlier. It's about an entire year. People might come to the trail, they learn about it, but they build a second home, they decide to come back. And so when we talk about things stressing and issues arising, we oftentimes think about the point in time, but then quickly realize that it's actually about a whole year. So last year, what happened for us, as many of you know, we had only about 16 and a half, well, I'll probably get fact checked here, but it was about 16 inches of snow leading up to the Berkey. And the largest single snowfall before that, anybody want to guess? Was on Halloween, because it was the one day I skied on a trail last year. So for us, it was really, really difficult. And so the idea that we're going to have, and as he also mentioned, so we now have 44 events throughout a year. So the idea was, it's not just that it's a singular event, we actually have about 17 winter events, so that if we don't have snow, it's not only the singular Birkebeiner that's going to get canceled, but a whole series of events starting as early as the Turkey Berkey and Thanksgiving, all the way through some of the events we have in March. So as this started getting worse and worse, no snow warm, everybody remembers it was raining on Christmas. After the 2017 cancellation, that was the other cancellation we talked about, one of the two, the American Birkebeiner, I had been there since 2013. We decided, hey, we're going to start making snow. And I thought, that is crazy. We're going to make snow in northern Wisconsin? Really? Are you serious? Well, we'll get back to that story later when we have more time, but at the end of the day, we did start making snow, and we'd invested actually a fairly small amount in the whole scheme of things. We've invested about $800,000 in our snowmaking system. Comparing that to a large system like at Spirit Mountain or somewhere else, it's like really, really tiny. But for us last year, we knew it was the 50th anniversary because there had been another cancellation twice, so add a couple years in there, that we had to have the event. Jesse Diggins was going to be there, the largest international cross-country ski star. The World Cup had just happened in the Twin Cities. We were going to have to do everything we possibly could to make snow. But if you're making snow, it takes temperatures under 32, right? Well, we make snow out of wells, which means that the water's 50-some degrees. It's not great for making snow. So you realize we ended up with about 21 days last year that we could effectively make snow. So we got to Thanksgiving, very little snow. We got to Christmas, very little snow. We're getting now into early January, still very little snow. Any snow we get, it quickly rains. We ended up, to cut to the chase so I don't get rid of my 5 minutes and Kenny gives me the hook, but at the end of the day, basically, over a 9-day period, we pushed about 15 million gallons of water through our 7 snow guns and made 2 large piles of snow that is pretty common in Europe, actually. That's a way they actually farm snow oftentimes for cross-country trails. And then ended up employing county employees, because remember, again, if there's no snow, what are all the contractors doing normally in the winter? Plowing snow, moving snow. Well, they got a bit of a different chance of moving snow this year around. We started moving snow out onto cross-country trails. Instead of blowing it on an alpine hill or in one pile, now we had to move it. What was the problem with moving snow last year? The ground was not frozen. So now dump trucks trying to move on unfrozen ground start to create real issues. And so the long story short is we tried to figure out the puzzle in real time. A few actually journalists from Europe asked us after the race, what was the engineers that laid out that trail and how did they, I'm like, we were like standing out there pointing, chewing gum, saying, I don't know, go over there. It was sort of a northern Wisconsin MacGyver deal. But at the end of the day, the idea was, and I guess the thought I want to leave you with before we talk more maybe in depth about how and why we made some of these adaptations was that we knew that it was super important to our economy, and that, yes, the recreation was important, but at the end of the day, people were going to find ways to adapt to recreate, whether they were going to go out for a bike ride or running if they couldn't ski. But we knew that the economy relied on it, especially in northern Wisconsin, and so that we needed to bring the people to northern Wisconsin in some way, shape, or form. And the other part of that became really important was the ambassadors and the role models. I think a lot of times we in the winter industry, especially cross-country, don't do a great job of empowering our role models to talk about what's really important and why we should or shouldn't do something. And so we were really lucky to have the Jesse Diggins of the world talk about how important it is to adapt to the climate and make changes. And so at the end of the day, we ended up putting about 11 kilometers of snow down in golf courses and on trails, and hosted about 16,000 skiers over a 4-day period. And at the end of the day, in a normal winter, we get about that economic impact that weekend is about 7 million, and last year was 6.8. So we felt really good about trying to save that part of the recreation last year in a really hard winter. So I'll stop there because I'm now at 7 minutes. No.
You did great. Thanks, Ben.
Oh, I didn't show the slides. You can just run through. Those are just one of the piles that was starting to. That's kind of what it looked like there. There wasn't exactly a lot.
What are we looking at here, Ben?
That's actually a new building, a new Nordic ski chalet at Telmar. The pavement is actually a paved trail that you can see kind of running up the front there. I don't know if there's is that all the slides are, just two? And that's sort of what the end result started to look like.
Wow.
As you can see, sort of this ribbon of snow getting put out all around the natural landscape.
If I would have known, we could have done some atmospheric microphysics there. That's the albedo. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, wow, look, yeah, more. Oh, you gave us some good slides. Okay, now we'll have Ann come up and describe the winter that wasn't and the rainfall of the summer. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you so much. Appreciate this. So when you're trying to run a ski resort in a winter like last winter, it's a little stressful. And it didn't stop there because we did have the summer deluge. But this is a picture of our ideal. You see the river estuary out there, that's the St. Louis River estuary, nice and frozen, there's snow on it. We have a 36-inch base, we've been making snow since mid-November, we groom it nightly, and we have seasonable winter temperatures. Because Spirit Mountain relies on snow that we make. That's how we start our season in November, and it allows us to put down a very safe 3 feet base so that our skiers are safe and have a good experience. Natural snow supplements that, and we want that, but we rely on artificial or man-made snow. So this is what we want. That didn't happen last year, but this is what it looks like. We have these great snow guns. We have about 27 snow guns, and they're hooked up to a water system that pumps water from the estuary across the street, and then another big pump system pumps it up the hill, and we feed it through a system of snow guns that are scattered throughout the hill as well as snow sticks. And you should know something about that. In doing that, we are contributing to the very problem we're talking about here. It takes a massive amount of energy to pump that much water uphill. We pump an average of 87,000 gallons a year. Last year, we pumped almost 100,000 gallons of water a year. And so when you, my electric bill for the months that we are making snow, easily $110,000, easily. Plus we have the cost of, the environmental cost and the other cost of the diesel that we use to use our snow groomers. So we're kind of in this situation where we're contributing to the problem that we are experiencing. We also rely on something called snow sticks. That's that little skinny thing sticking up. It allows us to make massive amounts of snow very easily without needing electricity except to pump the water up. It requires cooler temps. Ideally, we start making snow when we have a forecast of about 24 degrees that's going to last for a long time. We want to have a little bit lower humidity, and that's not happening. I'm just kind of gotten sick from the last presentation. And we want to be able to make snow efficiently, because if we're making snow at higher temps, we're just spraying water. We end up using a lot of resources at not very good impact. So that's what we like. That's what happens in a good year. And we end up with this. It's a good, safe base. People have a good time. This is what happened last year. I'm going to first direct your attention to the estuary. You don't see snow and ice. I live on the river. It did not freeze last year. And in addition, it created a huge impact on how we can make our snow. So we normally start making snow the second week in November. This year, it was the third week in November. We had to keep repeating the process because we'd make snow, it would get nice, or it would rain, and it would melt. So we started over and over and over again, trying to get that 2 to 3 foot base. We ended up making snow all the way through to March 23rd. That is a full month longer than our longest time in our 50-year history, and it also resulted in us using about 10% more water to do that because we kept repeating and repeating and repeating. And what that also does is, so we had a base. It was not pretty. We groomed it every night. It was not pretty. But what we couldn't always do is attract the visitors that we need to help support our business, because we had the runs actually covered. It took us a while, but we had them. But people in the Twin Cities were riding their bikes to work with no snow. They were kayaking. They were golfing. People in Duluth who could see that Spirit Mountain had snow weren't snowy because it's not, you don't feel like it. You know, it's too nice. You don't want to get your skis out. And so it has that big impact that Ben was just talking about on our economy, because in addition to providing a lot of outdoor recreation, we are a huge driver of the local economy. And we didn't see the impact this year of people, particularly out-of-town visitors, coming and staying in our hotels and dining out and enjoying that. And that also takes a hit on our resources financially and on our team, because you can't keep people working when you don't have the business coming in. So there are impacts that go beyond the winter ones. This shows some seriously degraded snow quality, and you had your concern with the Berkey, and we suffered with you. This was the site of our lower Nordic ski area about 3 or 4 days before a major ski event that had been planned a year in advance. You'll notice off to the sides of the hill there is no snow. And so we needed to be able to put on a national competition on March 21 through 26, I believe. And there was a super tour, and it took superhuman effort to do it. We hogged snow from one part of the hill that still had some to another. So we're pushing big piles of very wet, sloppy snow down the hill and using it to fill in some spots. We had cold day and like March 23rd, and we were able to make snow, which is why we went as long as we did. And then just another example of what that looked like. And oh, I'm sorry. I can lean in, yes. Finally, doing this, and we are able to do it, but it is costly, and it's costly not just in terms of equipment and resources. It's costly in terms of the environment, because we are using more diesel. We are using more electric. And it's not lost on us that we end up contributing to the very problem that is causing our challenges. So our adaptations are pretty minimal. We don't have a lot of choice. There are some technologies being explored to use different snow surfaces. I think given where we're located, with everything that rolls down into the St. Louis River, I think that would be at the very least problematic, if not a good idea. I know that in some places, particularly in Europe, they will make a lot of snow while they can and kind of pack it under hay bales and haul it out again. I don't see that being practical where Spirit is either. So we are, I think we're awaiting technology. We are hoping for more efficient equipment that we can stop contributing as much to the greenhouse gases. But in terms of adaptations, we're sort of snow farmers, and we are really reliant on a lot of what the weather brings us. And I'm going to go really quickly into summer, because we don't just do winter skiing, Nordic, and downhill. We also have mountain biking is a huge part of our business. It's a huge part of our summer recreation. We have about 30 trails. And in June, that got really ugly too, because summer was going to be our time to catch up. This is the result of 2 heavy rainfalls in June. You'll see the picture on the left is a total washout of a mountain bike trail. The one on the right shows erosion going right down the middle of a mountain bike trail. And we have one more. This is what the road in our campground looked like after those heavy rains. And so we do have some adaptations here that we can and are making. So now The trails that I showed you, some of them are quite old in design, so as we add new mountain bike trails and add new features, we are building them with the wisdom of having had this experience, and so they are and will continue to be more resistant to these heavy rain events because we're on a hill. You know, we have a 700-foot vertical drop. And the other thing we can do, it takes a little bit of investment, but we have a 1,600-acre campus, and creating a stormwater management plan is something we're working on with our colleagues at the city because Spirit is a city-owned recreation area, and both looking for funds to create a stormwater management plan and then implement what that plan tells us to make sure that we are not only minimizing any damage to our infrastructure, but also the damage to the environment that's caused when all that runoff goes rushing down the hill and dumps itself into the river and other events. So we do have some adaptations there, and I'm looking to Kenny for the adaptations we're going to get for our winter. Katie, thank you. I wrote it all down.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann. All right, great. And Lisa, we've got slides here. Okay.
Okay, yeah. If you're getting a little sleepy in the afternoon, anybody know who this is? It's a seal from the zoo. Okay, this is Feisty. Feisty is a seal. She's the symbol of my climate adaptation wake-up call, and I think the wake-up call for the city of Duluth. So my story, I'm going to tell a little bit older one, but it starts before my time with the Superior Hiking Trail, but I'll get to a little bit of the Superior Hiking Trail as well. I've been a resident of Duluth, like Kenny said, for nearly 2 decades, and in 2012, Duluth experienced a 500-year flood. And what that looks like and what that felt like was that about in various places in Duluth, between 7 and 10 inches of rainfall, saturated the soils, washed out our roads, and flooded our green spaces. We have 42 creeks running down the hillside of Duluth. Most are connected or traversed through some form of green space. So our community was ravaged. And this included the Lake Superior Zoo, where Feisty, the seal, found herself floating out of her exhibit area and into the middle of the adjacent highway. Yeah. So, you know, the city of Duluth received a lot of, we got a lot of aid and money to fully recover. And unfortunately, you know, the road to recovery, or for a community to recover from an event like this, it leaves scars on the landscape, that are still there. You can see them throughout the hillside, impressions of and changes due to that flood. It also left some scars on our community. We lost some of our favorite green spaces. Things just didn't feel the same. I remember going to Chester Creek and running along the trail, not really running because there was down trees everywhere, but it was unrecognizable. This place that I knew by heart was gone. And so for us, I think, and many of us who work in outdoor recreation, that was our first wake-up call in the city of Duluth. And so shortly thereafter, I started working actually for the city of Duluth in 2015, and I got to work on a lot of the projects where we were, revitalizing the neighborhood parks and looking at increasing our resiliency. And Kenny came to town in 2017, and there was 50 outdoor recreation folks at NOAA Coastal. I think it was sponsored maybe by Sea Grant, was a partner, talking about recreation, outdoor adaptation. And we sat around at the Lake Superior Zoo just next door, and, Kenny gave us the bad news: wetter and warmer. The best activity for us will be what was it like? Sledding. I think you said sledding was the new winter norm or something. Tubing, and And so we all left that meeting feeling like a little, oh my goodness, that's a lot. Coming up with some ideas. Spirit Mountain was there. A lot of people were there. And woke up the next morning to a good chunk of the lake walk being gone after a huge nor'easter came through and wiped out yet another recreational resource. So we know the vulnerability of our community. We feel it, and the Superior Hiking Trail is obviously at the heart of that too. We have 42 miles here in the city of Duluth. But if you follow us on any sort of social, these are things that you commonly see in the last year. You see that we've had fire bans on the Superior Hiking Trail. We currently have a fire ban. We've had ongoing floods, some really historic floods, events like just things that you normally wouldn't experience in the winter, like ice hazards. People, there's no snow to go skiing. We're going to go for a nice hike. There's a lot of water seepage off those rocky cliffs, and it's really icy. You're post-holing. It's no fun to go snowshoeing or hiking. Air quality has been a huge issue on the trail and for our users. And because when folks can't or don't feel like it is a winter wonderland, they head out to the trail. And our trail goes through what's called a freeze-thaw cycle. And so we're having these really elongated shoulder seasons, causing a lot of damages to our trail, and heavier use as well, year-round use. So what we're doing, we do have a couple things that we're doing to improve our trail experience, and part of that is through our design. So we can look at rerouting our trail to higher and drier ground when it does get washed out. Places where it's tight to shoreline, we're rerouting, armoring. We're using natural materials that are found on site as much as we can. We're also the example of new infrastructure, steel infrastructure versus classic wood infrastructure, replacing as we can, armoring as we can, and, sometimes changing our method. So this is the Encampment River. We're no longer trying to build bridges there. We have failed miserably multiple times. Now you have a nice stone step crossing. And these are examples of a couple other styles of design that we're using to just work with more flashier, heavier rains so our infrastructure isn't washed out constantly. So, yeah.
That was, so you get a sense, we all get a sense for kind of what we've been dealing with and facing recreationally. I mean, is there anything, I guess this will be kind of open, please use the microphone, and, Lisa, you can start, or whomever, but is there anything that you've learned from this experience, or that knowing now if you'd known it then, what you might have done differently, or I guess tacked onto that, what other resources, if there are any, I mean, and Ann kind of alluded to it, what resources could potentially help adapting to the kinds of stressors that you've been facing? I know it's not an easy question necessarily. So, but any of those lessons that you've learned, things you might have done differently, knowing now, or if you knew then, if you could anticipate these things, are there any? Go ahead, Ann or Ben.
Hello. That work? I think I think there's a couple interesting things. One, I agree 100%. And Europe seems to be a little bit further ahead of us in this regard. Craftsbury out east is doing, and this is again in the cross-country realm. So there are more and more. We've started to look at storing snow, and again, different than Alpine because we need so much less. 5 kilometers of snow for us is about 7 or 8 million gallons of water run through a snow gun, and so it's far less than the volume. But we did a study with Craftsbury a couple years ago on storing snow. So there was 10 million gallons worth of snow created. It was covered with approximately 1 meter of sawdust, and then covered with a blanket essentially that kept the water off it in the summer. And Craftsbury in Vermont is not far off our lat lawn. And anybody have any guess what the volume they lost over a summer? They made it in, so the advantage is you make it in January. It's super cold, efficient for making snow. You make it in one place, and then you move it in theory when the ground's frozen. Any sense on volume lost? It was 13. They did it 1 year was 13, 1 year was 12. So that's not bad when you consider amount lost. A lot of the loss actually they found is at the bottom because as snow melts, right, it starts to create ice, and so really having good drainage was important. So there is some adaptations for cross country that make it a little bit easier than alpine because our volumes are so much less. But one of the other interesting things that we're seeing in the cross country world is that the consumer demand is actually changing, we think, and we're seeing it. If you think of cross-country skiing in 1980, and you went into the woods, and off you went on a trail, and you didn't see anybody else. And it was long trails, and the racing were long trails, and that's what racing or skiing was. And even, I think of recreating now, right? It's nice to go on a trail and not see anyone, it's quiet. But I think what we're seeing actually is the cross-country skiing is actually wanting the social component as well. And so they started to see World Cups change in the mid-90s going down to 5K loops. And people are like, 5K loop, that's crazy. Who's going to ski on 5K? That's dumb. No. Skiing is 50 kilometers in the woods. Well, and so nobody would go to, you'd say, if we're going to make this cross-country ski place and at 5 kilometers, people are like, that's crazy. Well, no one's going to go there. Well, now it's evolved to the point that you look at the Twin Cities as very familiar in the Midwest, or you look at some of the areas even further, even at Soldiers Hollow where they're going to have the Olympics, they only make about 7 kilometers. So the consumer demand has actually changed quite a bit, that they've realized as not only that we try and adapt to make sure the sport stays viable, that the demand is starting to change based on what is available. And so that, all right, wow, the norm now is 5 kilometers of skiing. That is pretty awesome that I can have 5 kilometers. There's a social component. It's big enough. I feel I can get away. So we're seeing not only the adaptations on the production side or what you're creating, but I think communicating and be a part of what the demand is on the user side is actually really important too. And so that's one of the things that we've noticed in sort of the cross-country world.
Thanks, Ben.
And I would say a lesson learned, and I'm not sure this is an adaptation, is we have to look at our operation as a business as well. And I'm not sure if we saw that ugly map with the long-term forecast, and I'm not sure that we would have tried to follow our old model of starting to make snow in November, seeing what it was going to be, because there's a certain expense in that with no return. So I think that's more of a business decision. It's not a climate adaptation decision.
Anything to add, Lisa? Okay. I guess question, we've kind of touched on this, but I had wanted to know, for any other activities that are really condition specific. So we're talking about snow, right? If you've got good weather, then you can theoretically bike all year round. If you've got good weather, in quotes, right? In the right conditions, you can do certain activities. You can hike when there's no snow. But skiing, and there is an example of something that is condition specific. Are you talking to other people in your industry about what's happening to this resource? So okay, you can make snow and then preserve it. I was wondering if you could also just take, during an abundant snow winter, can you also do the same thing, right? And just move the snow. But, if we keep warming the way we're warming, then in 30 years, the winter climate has advanced far beyond where it is now. And I'm just wondering what people in your world are talking about when you have an activity that is condition specific. And again, I don't know if there might not be an answer. I'm asking the leading lights here.
I think obviously when we think of skiing, there's certainly jumping and alpine. There's plenty of alpine hills in Dubai now that are on plastic. So I think, but when we think what is the essence of recreation is more than just the physical act of doing it oftentimes, right? There's the emotion that comes with doing it in a certain environment, and I think the environment's a big part of it. Anybody know somebody that can ride their trainer inside for 8 hours? Maybe you, but not many, right? Who wants to ride your bike on a trainer for 8 hours inside? You want to ride your bike outside. It's fun and see the squirrels and whatever. So I think that's going to be the bigger challenge. And until the consumer, the participant, says, yeah, that's what I want and demands it, I think that becomes really hard. But I think the other part that we are seeing from the industry side and getting a lot of pressure is exactly what you alluded to, that oftentimes people say, well, that's great that you make snow or you change. A little bit easier with mountain bike trails, I think, is we've been building them too because you understanding the design changes. But being a part of the problem is really very visible. You know, we talk about we just pumped 10 million gallons out of the aquifer to do the snow. You're using huge amounts of electricity to make snow. So it's trying to, you know, cross country, we can all talk about we love hugging trees and that's us, we granola bars. But I think we also have to then also be really realistic about us saying, hey, we absolutely want to produce snow for you. We're going to have the greatest snow ever. But at the end of the day, it's also part of this problem that we see. So what we're now seeing is the population demanding of us saying, hey, we want the snow. We're oftentimes willing to fund it. We're willing to donate to support it. We're willing to pay more for trail passes if you'll do it in an environmentally sound way. So if you're willing to put in enough solar to offset your snowmaking, one option, right? Are you willing to do that, or maybe make a mix of geothermal and solar to help make sure that you're carbon neutral as part of your snowmaking? Or create some sort of stormwater runoffs plan so that as you make all this snow runs off your ski trail, where is it going to go? We happen to be surrounded by the Nemacolin, if anybody's aware of the Nemacolin River, right? It's this really beautiful river that runs right by where we are. And so there's, I think, the demand from the consumer saying, hey, we still love this part of recreation, but also if you're going to create some of these solutions, making sure they don't also become a part of the problem.
Very good. Well, thank you. Anything to add, Ann, about snow as a resource that's condition specific?
Well, there is a lot of talk, as has been noted in the industry, about alternatives to buy. I think that, you know, you look at some things and they're maybe for other resorts, maybe it's a Vail resort, but it is not for a City of Duluth-owned Spirit Mountain Recreation Area. That's just not realistic. And I don't think, even in my role, that I would advocate for it because the cost to implement it would not really be recouped. And so you end up making a really ugly choice, right? That you no longer are able to offer it. If the temperatures never get below 24 and if we don't find some way to adapt the technology, maybe some new type of additive that allows us to make snow at those temperatures that go as they go up, I don't see that being something that would be available in Duluth, Minnesota.
Okay, I just want to remind the audience here that our climate still has normal variations too. So, okay, because I'm taking the temperature of this one, and it's like, okay, yeah, you will ski again, all right? And you're going to probably do it this winter, okay? Yeah, so.
I think you can also adapt as well in terms of, we actually now spend as much as, so our snow grooming budget for us, we have about 110 kilometers of ski trails, is about $1.5 million throughout the year. And before that, a lot of that was on a little bit of making snow because we only make snow in a small area, but running piston bullies and the staffing to do it. We actually now spend far more in the summer months getting ready because we have fortunate enough, our head groomer is from Spirit Mountain, thank you. Eric is awesome, but he said, listen, Ben, we can go ski on a golf course on 2 inches of snow. 2 inches of snow, I can go ski on a golf course. But on our current trail conditions, I need a foot to be able to take the groomer out there. So he's like, if you give us the ability and the resources to make the ski trail more like a golf course, then I can actually utilize far less snow, or it'll take me far less snow to actually make a skiable product. And so those are some of the other adaptations that aren't quite as gloom and doom in terms of no snow, all the snow, but the little adaptations that we say, hey, we want to create a golf course ski trail, meaning can we have it? And of course, you run into some challenges with the pesky trees that take out the sunlight, and so you can't grow grass. You know,
Yeah.
you could cut those down. But no, the idea that if you can create a surface that allows you to use much less snow, that actually can be part of a solution too.
All right. Lisa, did you have anything to add? Otherwise, I have a question for you.
No.
Okay. So Lisa, with the Superior Hiking Trail, beloved resource used by many Minnesotans at many times of the year. So folks in this room probably know when Hurricane Helene came inland and affected the southeastern U.S. and really had a much larger footprint than is normal in terms of inland destruction. One of the things that was damaged, at least about 800 miles of the Appalachian Trail was closed. Now, there's no way yet to do a comprehensive survey. I mean, you can fly drones and there's a sense, but you have to remove trees to see what the real damage to the infrastructure is. So it might be premature, but I'm wondering if that event gave you and your colleagues at Superior Hiking some, a chance to think, to anticipate, okay, what is our Hurricane Helene and how can we prepare for that? And it might be a rainfall event. I mean, but
yeah, and I mean, going back again to 2012 in the city of Duluth, that we did have that 500-year flood that did alter the route of the Superior Hiking Trail significantly, and has subsequently impacted our alignment because what happened was it's created new kind of water seepages or passages through the hillside. So I give the example, we go through the Spirit Mountain property in places where we once just had a small footbridge that was, 5 feet long over, kind of a shallow, rocky, ditch that was only a couple feet deep. We now have a 30-foot deep ravine with, a 35-foot bridge. And that's the reality if we want to keep our alignment. We're kind of fortunate in the sense that we can often reroute because of our size, but you can imagine it's death by 1,000 cuts as far as capacity if we have to reroute all over our 300-mile trail. So that is definitely something that kind of keeps us up at night. And I would note, though, that one stressor we did not talk about, and it does impact our ability to shape shift, like I was saying with reroutes, is that there's climate refugees that are coming to our area, and there's a lot of pressure on development and to our adjacent green spaces that never existed before. So, in the last, 40 years of the SHT, it was pretty easy for us if we, designed the trail in one section, noticed that it was, eroding, we could reroute it pretty easily. Now we have new landowners, new developers, and new land uses that are happening in areas that didn't exist before. So we could get kind of pinched, essentially, to an alignment that could not be sustainable in the future.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. And the sort of ruggedization that you showed, you had a picture of a bridge you were converting to steel some steel structural foundation. I assume those aren't super cheap.
No.
Yeah, but are there? Okay.
They're also in really remote areas. So
Yeah.
something that we rely on snow is that we do winter freighting. So you can imagine, for us to be able to get materials out safely without breaking the backs of our volunteers, we use snowmobiles and sleighs to get out our materials in the winter. So last year was really tricky because we could not do any, kind of remote winter freighting that we normally do. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting, because I'm sure people think, well, just make it, thank you, make it stronger, but that takes a lot of work. We were talking about this in the previous section. Adaptation isn't cheap necessarily, right? So thank you. All right, I'm going to ask just sort of each of you, as you've heard each other talk, any ideas firing? I'm putting you on the spot, although I did tell you I was going to put you on the spot. But as you've heard each other describe your stories, have either of you thought, okay, wow, this is what I might think of in that situation, or here's what I would recommend, or ooh, I wish I had thought of that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the interesting thing as you listen to others in different scenarios, the idea that there isn't one sort of fix that fixes all, because, like you said, you had a cross-country ski race at the end of March, right? The easy to adaptation is, well, we're just not going to do any cross-country ski race into March. But I actually stayed at Spirit Mountain one of the last weekends, and I was like, there's nobody skiing because the conditions. You can close yours. They were crap, right? Because your point, because we skied on, it was like super icy and super hard, and so you put yourself inside of the consumer. That oftentimes we're all the providers as part of it, and so you then put yourself inside of the consumer, going, man, how do I get people to come and do that? And so I think the real challenge here is that we all, whether it's reshaping trails, deciding when we're going to put down snow or not put down snow, the idea of determining what is it that end user wants. The other thing that is still we saw this huge boom in users, I think all of us, as part of COVID, getting outside and utilizing it. And I would imagine that's still a lot of high use scenarios. And oftentimes those users, maybe the newer users, aren't as familiar with trail closure? I'll go around. It can't be that big a deal. Or what are some of these rules? And it's no problem. And so I think the more we work together to help educate and understand that there are adaptations, whether it's in alpine skiing, cross-country skiing, hiking, mountain biking, that it's a lot of the same messaging, that actually the working together is what's starting to flow in my mind around. It doesn't matter what the mode is of alpine, cross-country, whatever, that we're all trying to adapt in a way that's going to be different. And part of that is changing the mind of the consumer a little bit to understand that adaptation's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just what we have to do. And that your cross-country skiing, for example, isn't what it was in 1981, but it can still be pretty cool. So, I don't know.
If I could, I really would like to echo that. We have a very vocal community in Duluth, which is wonderful, and they will tell you what they're happy with, and they will also tell you what they're not happy with. And I think that normally the conditions that our guests experienced this year, because it was icy, we were grinding up ice as we groom it. It was better than nothing, but it wasn't pretty. I think that people knew that it wasn't a normal weather condition. And in my short time at Spirit, it's the first time I've had people thanking us for managing to do something under the circumstances. So there is something about our continuing to provide, whether it's wise or not, continuing to provide the experience, and people recognizing that it won't be like it was after we had that great snow winter of 22, 23.
I mean, I think talking about working together on messaging, the Grand Avenue Nordic Chalet, the base of Spirit Mountain, I think is a great example where, really branding it as a multi-trail hub. And I often have heard, that, kids are going to their Nordic ski lessons, and then their parent is going for a hike on the Spirit hiking trail. And so sometimes when you can brand a place as just like, this is the recreation place, and no matter what the weather is, we're going to the place we do recreation, and there's a lot of different opportunities, then it can at least encourage people to continue to get outdoors and connect with nature in a meaningful way. So that's one way we can brand and work together.
Nice. All right, I have a question for the audience. All right. Do you want me to end this on a cheery note, or do you want to ask a question or two of the panel? Yell it out, and we've got about 10 seconds to decide. Okay, all right, great. All right, so we're going to end on an upbeat note. So one thing that we deal with a lot, thank you, in my world, and talking to audiences about how the climate is changing, is something you might think of as it's a kind of climatic temporal myopia. What the heck does that mean? It's sort of nearsightedness to what's happened just now. We tend to think that whatever just happened is forever, right? And you get into a drought, and it seems like it's never going to rain again. And then you get the summer of 2024 and you realize it does rain still. And then you think the rains are never going to stop, and you get into the fall of 2024. The winter last year felt like a bummer. But I'm telling you, one of the things that is sort of a gift of our climate here in the Midwest is its natural variability. We are always going to have ups and downs in it. We do have trends, and they are, you can put your own adjective to describe it, but we're also going to have plenty of winters yet, even decades into the future. It's probably also true, though, that, we're going to have an increased frequency of the really challenging winters. And that's kind of the part that we're really talking about. It's not the total absence of winter. It's always going to be the coldest and darkest time of year here. But so we're going to have decent summers. You're going to have good winters. It's just we're going to have these challenges probably increasing. But you don't have to despair that there will never be skiing again. There will be skiing again. We have not reached a point where we're done with powdery snow or anything like that. So don't despair thinking this thing that I love is never coming back, but it is probably going to face long-term challenges. And I thank the panelists for being really honest about that, because it's tough. It's tough to deal with what's almost an existential crisis in the area in which you work. But I want to ask each of you, we'll start with Ann, and we'll go, what, let me make sure I'm phrasing it right, but yeah, just what is giving you hope? What is something that, as you confront the challenges of a changing climate, what's something that helps you kind of think, yeah, okay, we can do this part, or this is going to be okay? You're taking care of these folks out here right now. It's been an emotionally difficult session.
So I think what gives me hope is part of Spirit's mission is to be to provide multiple outdoor recreation opportunities, something that Lisa mentioned. So I know we will always be able to do that, and we have added things in our 50-year history. We didn't start out with mountain biking. We didn't really start out with Nordic much. We used to have a swimming pool. We got rid of that. So we've adapted as things have changed, and I think we will continue to do that. And I also have some hope in the ability of the vendors we work with to help us navigate some of the more challenging snowmaking times, such as I mentioned, some additives that allow us to make snow effectively at 28, where right now we're at 24 and below. So I see some hope there, and I'll just end with that.
Great. Lisa.
Well, I always say that the trail is as much a community as it is a trail, and we're pretty feisty community, to go along with the seal analogy, but we're very adaptable, and I think when you work on trail, we're very, very accustomed to having to work with the landscape, and that's just part of trail building and trail design. So I just kind of take it in stride that we, within the trail world, are going to be able to adapt with, and I've seen it time and time again with every instance, whether it's a flood or a slumping shoreline. We always just adapt, and so I have great hope that the Superior Hiking Trail will be here for the long haul.
Somebody had asked me the other day about what's the feeling of seeing snow when it first starts to come down in the fall, your first snowfall. I said, well, that's easy answer. It's like a 7-year-old on Christmas Eve. It's like fantastic. And so I really believe that we'll continue to see that. And I think similarly that we're going to see that, and it's going to provide that excitement for the lovers of winter and outdoor recreation, and that the consumer, the participants, all of us that love doing it are going to be willing to adapt with us to whatever that recreation we're able to create around the sport they love. They're going to want to do it, and they want to be a part of it, and they realize how much work you put in to make it happen. So that's what gives me hope, that we have great people that love to recreate in whatever way it is, and so
Wonderful.
we're going to do it for another
Thank you.
50 years, I guess.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks to this patient and accommodating audience, and thanks to these wonderful panelists. And I'll just leave you with one more idea, which is that even as the climate changes, I mean, I've always loved the weather. The sky will continue to be beautiful, and the outdoors will continue to be beautiful and kind of a refuge for us. So you will be able to enjoy it in a number of ways going forward, even as we face challenges. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening and weekend.